right, we're back, and we're back with again talking with Benjamin Hunting, who was just here a few months ago to talk about his other Kickstarter, the Model UN, and who was here, who I talked with 2 years ago about the book, same book that we're going to be talking about today, Dead Air.
Ye- Yeah,
How are you doing?
it's been a bit of a journey for Dead Air. One of my creative partners, Joe Ing, he had a medical issue that kind of took him off the board for about a year, and as a result, we had the third issue of the book written, and we'd actually started on about 5 or 6 pages when it happened, and we were forced to push that to the side and give Joe the time and space he needed to get better. And he just shortly after Molly UN, actually, we met up, and he told me that he was ready to get back on the Dead Air book, and we're almost completed. The issue's art. I think we have a couple pages left to do. So he's been working really hard on that, and it's just been really fun to get back in that world. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I was back in the thick of it and seeing the characters come to life again. And I had kind of filed it away in the back part of my brain. Um, and it's just nice to return to something that's like comfortable and fun. And it's really kind of reinvigorated me as a writer, I think.
Well, before we get into talking about the book, and I know we've done this multiple times, but tell us a little bit about yourself and your comic book journey as a
Sure.
reader and creator. I mean, I'm sure maybe we'll hear something new, or maybe you remember something, or
So sure, I'm a professional writer by trade outside the comic book world. I've been freelance writing mostly in automotive, but some technology and culture stuff for 18 years now. And I only really got into comic books as an adult. I When I was younger, I read a lot of what I guess you would consider them, Saturday morning cartoons. Like Saturday in Canada, Sunday morning in the U.S. Stuff like Peanuts and Doonesbury, and all the classics. Basically, I loved them. I read the compilations. I was excited every weekend when the newspaper came in, and I read a lot of Archie and Veronica and Jughead and that kind of stuff too. But superhero comics really passed me by. My father had a few Batman collections around the house that I would read, but I never pursued it. And I would go to friends' houses and I would leaf through X-Men stuff in the 90s, and it was fine, but I don't know why it just didn't connect with me at that point in my life. And then when I was in my early 30s, I moved into a new neighborhood in Montreal, and there was a comic book shop that opened maybe a couple months beforehand. And I walked in, and I, over time, befriended the staff and realized that I had this love for what was generally called independent comics, which is like a huge, meaninglessly broad term. But yeah, exactly. But the book that really pulled me in was Alison Bechdel's her work. I was completely blown away. I didn't know that comic books could be like that. I didn't know that they could tell those kinds of stories, and I was reading stories that I couldn't find anywhere else, like about topics that weren't being discussed in the mainstream, and that was just this huge force that sucked me into comics hardcore. And after about 8 or 9 years of reading them, I decided to try my hand at writing them. And starting in, I guess it was 2018 or 2019, I began a comic book series called Code 45, also collaborating with Joe Ing and Angela Hodge, who are both my creative partners on Dead Air. And we worked through that for about 2 or 3 years, published that on Kickstarter and then through Scout Comics. And I have to tell everyone listening to never ever partner with Scout Comics on any project ever. They are not to be trusted, and they are actively stealing from us as we record this podcast. So that's unfortunate, and it's funny that not funny, but more sad that every couple of weeks another Scout comic creator reaches out to me with a similar story. I've kind of become a lightning rod, I think, for people to reach out and feel like they're not alone in that. But in any case, it was a baptism by fire on both sides of the comic book industry. I'd never written anything, I'd never self published, I'd never done a Kickstarter, and I'd never done the independent comic publishing. So I got to do all of that at once, have all of those experiences. And following that, we picked up with Dead Air. We did 2 issues of that, and now we're on the third. And in between, I worked on a smaller project called Model UN, which is my experiment with a manga style black and white different type of comic book, different type of storytelling, but one that was a lot of fun to do.
So, tell us about give us the general premise and general setting for Dead Air.
Sure. The premise is, what if there you could in let me start that again. What if one day out of the year you could talk to the dead? That was kind of the idea around which the story coalesced. And in the book, it jumps between two time periods. There's a group of friends who are university radio DJs in the 90s, and they're all very close. And then we also see them in 2011, about 15 years later, when they're all adults, they've all gone their separate ways. But what happens is in the 90s, there's a tragedy that occurs in their friend group. And the story picks up in the later years, the adult years, where one member of that group decides to use this technology, which is called dtalk, that lets you talk to the dead, finally to reach out to someone who was involved in that tragedy and apologize for what happened. She feels very responsible, and what she discovers when she tries to do this completely shakes her understanding of what had happened in her past. So the story hinges around the group of adults in their future, their present, I guess you would say, dealing with the fact that a common trauma that they experienced wasn't what wasn't at all what they thought it was, and they have the opportunity to maybe do something about that and fix it. And then he bounces back and forth between that era and the period when they were all young when the tragedy occurred, and the build up to that. So a lot of the story is really about friendship and how friendships can change over time, and how there's this period of your life where you're very young, you're very excited about the world, and you feel very close to people around you in a way that maybe doesn't happen when you're older because you're all sharing that same intensity. And then the idea of what happens when you have this group of friends who are so close and a tragedy befalls them, and then you extend that over a 10 or 15 year period. What are the ties that bind? I mean, how do these relationships survive, and what are these people like when when they're interacting with each other, maybe for the first time in a long time when we catch up to them?
So, kind of what was the inspiration for that you know story or those themes?
I had wanted to write a story set in college radio because it's something that I did in that era when I was young myself, and I it was an experience I enjoyed. And there's a lot of, I mean, when you're that age, a lot of weird stuff happens. You can mine a lot of anecdotes for story ideas, and you always meet strange characters when you're in university. People who are it's an interesting part of your life because your people come in and out of your social circle that you maybe would never have met under any other circumstances. So that was a fun thing to play with these characters. Like there's a metalhead, there's a goth girl, there's a techno DJ, there's someone who's into Britpop. These are all really different scenes, but because of the radio station, they all mix and mingle together. So I thought that would be fun to write about those people, but I didn't want to do it as a slice of life. I had read some slice of life books set at university, like Giant Days, I think is a really popular one. And it had been recommended to me, and I read it, and it was fine, but I don't think it was for me, just in terms of the way the story flowed. I wanted to have an exterior tension that would push these characters in the same direction. So I had a really hard time coming up with what that would be. And I remember running into the kitchen one night, and my then fiance, now wife, was sitting at the table, and I said to her, "What if one day out of the year you could talk to the dead? Like, what if you could do that? What if there's a technology like a phone you pick up and you do that, and you can talk to dead people?" And she's like, "That'll work. That'll be that's your way into the story." And so I just kind of ran from it from there, and then started building a world. I was like, not only was I thinking, okay, how would this affect these characters if they could go back, reach into their past, and theoretically figure out something that a tragedy that had befallen them, figure out something about it. But how would that transform society in general? Like, what would that do to organized religion? What would that do to culture? And then what would happen when everyone in the world got bored with that technology and just moved on? Because that's what we do. We get excited about something, and then it becomes old hat, and 2 years later no one cares about it. I see it all
Yeah,
the time. Like what we're doing right now, video conferencing, would have blown my mind in the 90s, but it's in my pocket now. I can take it out and
yeah,
look at it, and it's wild. It doesn't mean anything anymore. So I
right.
figured that would happen, this miracle of reaching across the cosmos and talking to the deceased would eventually become that.
Well, even when you're talking about music, I mean, we're probably I think we're the same age. And I, did a little radio in my college days too. I mean, we basically, still used the CDs. And then when I left my senior year, MP3s were the big thing. And
Yep.
it's
MP3s
like,
and I think that University Radio is the only place I've ever used a DAT tape like for
mm,
anything. We had I think we were using them for the ads that would go on. They would have a
yep.
roll of ads on the DAT tapes. And back then like it wasn't like we had hundreds of DAT tapes. It was like there were six or seven or something. They were constantly being reused and it was this limited resource that you had to be really careful with. Yeah. It's funny how things like that have changed, and yet some technologies like vinyl, there were two turntables in our DJ booth, and if you wanted to use them you had to pay into something called the needle exchange program, where you would pay, I guess it was like $20 a semester, because people couldn't be trusted to be careful with the needles, so have to replace them like every once in a while, right? So if you wanted to play vinyl, the only way you got the cartridge was if you were part of this program. And you would think that, of the technologies we're talking about, vinyl would be in the past, but really it's CDs and DATs that are gone,
Mhm.
and vinyl has endured. Like it had a lull and now it's back.
So, um, you you mentioned at the beginning at the show that you kind of, due to the artist's self, you kind of had to take a hiatus on the series. How was it returning, to the series after that, unexpected break? And was there anything that these saw that you did, you know in the first two issues that maybe you wanted to either build more upon or kind of smooth up?
Well, when we came back, the script for issue 3 was already done. So I didn't have any heavy lifting to do on the writing for this issue. But to address what you're asking, I started working on issue 4 about 2 months ago. I already had it structured out and I started the nitty gritty of writing the pages. And while I was doing that, I realized there were things I needed to go back in issue 3 and either clarify or maybe add one or two panels that would make it easier to link the events from issue 3 to issue 4 specifically. And I was lucky in that it happened during this like 10-page buffer where Joe was working that he hadn't done the pages yet, so I could put in a panel and it wouldn't disrupt things. And at the same time, while Joe was going through some of these pages, he would call me up and he'd be like, I find this page really challenging to figure out, or I think we can do this better on this page. And so we were able to, I love that because his visual brain is so much more advanced than I am, right? So I'll put something on a page and it doesn't necessarily mean it works or it's even the most effective way to get across whatever we're trying to communicate there, right? So to have him really going deep on designing these pages and thinking, hey, I think we can do this more effectively like this or like that, that was something that really helped shape the third issue after the time away. It was, we're both coming back with fresh eyes, and it was the energy that I got from that really helped in putting together issue 4, which is going to wrap up the series. It's going to be a bit longer, probably around 40, 45 pages. Because unfortunately, sometimes you have a story idea that doesn't have like neat equal breaks at like the 22-page mark or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So, but it's been really nice to return to this world. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I didn't really realize how much I missed it. I had been living with these characters for so long, and to not be working with them and inhabiting their universe was kind of sad. And I felt like a big weight had been lifted when we came back to it.
Now, since it is kind of heavy, and am I correct? Is there like a soundtrack that goes along, or are
Well,
you working on
we
something?
there's a few ways we've, so it's a super musically oriented series, right? Especially since when you're at the age that these characters are in the 90s, music, if you're musically inclined, it's a big part of your life and it can even define your whole personality. And I'm sure everyone loved that about me when I was a teenager, right? But We in the first couple of campaigns, I put together some playlists for radio show formats for various characters. Like there was a dance music playlist, there was a Britpop one. We were doing that on Spotify. I've stopped using Spotify for various ethical reasons. Kind of recommend other people maybe think about their how they consume music as well. So I haven't been those playlists are still up because they're part of my public profile. I've kept it up for that reason. But for this campaign, in the interim, in between issue 2 and issue 3, I started working locally at an FM station here in the townships. And I did something called Dead Air Radio, 1 hour a week, where I would play music from the 90s, sometimes in character of the DJs from the comic book, sometimes just taking their genres and playing specifically from that. So I do a goth show, I do an industrial show, I do a Britpop show. And I did that for about 18 months. And what we're offering with the Kickstarter this time around is I'm taking 10 of those shows, the best ones, the most interesting ones, and we're making them a downloadable reward where people access it by we have a tier where you get a 3D printed cassette, like a mixtape that Angela Hodges designed, and on that mixtape there's it comes in a case, there's a J card and everything, and there's a download code. So you get the tape, you hit the code, and then you get 10 hours of dead air radio. And it's kind of a fun way to. I mean, not a lot of people listen to radio these days, and I was fortunate at this station to have pretty much carte blanche. I could play whatever I wanted, a very free format. So I was really able to sculpt the shows along the lines of how I would have done it if I was a dead air character. So that's something fun and unusual that I don't often see on Kickstarters that we're really happy that we're able to share with people.
I know I don't listen to a lot of FM radio either. I mean, probably the only time I hear is like if I'm at the gym and
Yeah.
they have it playing in like the pool area, and it's like
Gyms, waiting rooms, that's like the big FM areas now.
and it's like 90s, 80s, 2000s. It's like I feel old.
Yeah, yeah. It's always like the greatest hit. It's like the best classics from period you grew up in, and then it just like stabs you through the heart.
Swimming in the pool, I'm just gonna sink down and not come up.
I walked into the gym today, and they were playing "Always" by Bon Jovi, and I don't remember the last time I heard it, but it instantly transported me back to like what 1994 and 1995, and all those angsty school dances where I would hear it played, and like, am I actually gonna slow dance with someone to this Bon Jovi song? Like, it's an emotional maelstrom I was not prepared for.
I don't know if have read it, but I recently completed the book 60 songs that define the 90s.
I have read it, and I've listened to much of that series. Yeah, it's
Okay,
very
yeah,
good. Rob Varvella, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that was kind of a trip down memory lane too. And
for sure, for sure. I really enjoyed that, and his style of presenting is also unique. I think in podcasting, I liked the way he put the shows together. It was a lot of fun. And I did learn a few things from it too. But the other, I mean, this is also kind of maybe too sad to talk about, but it makes you realize how many tragic stories there are from that era,
hmm
from performers and musicians, and their lives did not go the way they probably should have gone. So there's
hmm
a lot of that, like mining out from the 90s as well. I think some people tend to think of, well, the whole Kurt Cobain scene, like the Seattle side of things, a lot of drug addiction and overdosing and whatnot, but it's really not just limited to that part of rock and roll. Like there's a lot of just negativity that came out of that decade as well that is kind of glossed over, I think.
So, kind of talking about you continue talking about music. Who are your big '90s bands that you were into? I think we talked about this last time we
Yeah,
talked
we might have.
talked
Yeah.
dead air.
Um, so I'll give you the ones at the time and the ones that have like persisted. When I was a teenager, let's say like 16, 17 years old, I was listening to a lot of Portishead, Tori Amos, and Elastica. I was really into Britpop, so Echo Belly, Supergrass. That was really big for me. I had a big Nirvana phase as well, but well after they were popular, because I wasn't really that cool when I was like an early teen, so I didn't get to it in time. And then today I still listen to Portishead, but mostly bootlegs, like concerts and stuff, like recordings from fans and whatnot, because it's a new way to listen to music that I've heard a million billion times. I still listen to a lot of Ecobelly. I listen to almost no Nirvana, which is weird. I think it's possibly because I've just internalized it so much that it's a huge part of me all the time, and I don't need to listen to it anymore. Um, that music kind of becomes a part of you. And oh, also back in the '90s, I listened to a lot of Public Enemy, which I don't listen to as much anymore. Rage Against the Machine, same kind of deal. I don't think I'm less angry now, like maybe more, if that's possible. Like I'm more radicalized in my 40s, but yeah, it's. What about you? What stays with you from the '90s?
Uh, I mean, I was into like Stone Temple Pilots,
Mm.
Limp Bizkit, um, Nine Inch Nails was my big thing I was listening to that my parents probably would have not wanted me to listen to. Um, like Blues Traveler,
That's
you know, I
that's a very like broad spectrum of
yeah,
'90s music. I'm impressed. That's cool.
and you talk about the Nirvana. I think my latest thing that I've been kind of the rabbit hole I've kind of fallen into is it's bluegrass covers of songs like Nirvana and stuff like that, and it's they work.
Yeah, yeah. There's one of there's a bluegrass cover of Thunderstruck that I hear quite a bit. That's pretty
There's
good.
a there's a nice cover of Crazy Train too.
Oh wow. I
So
also love bluegrass from my parents listened to a lot of country music when I was growing up. So I listened to like a lot of Ricky Skaggs and Marty Stewart and guys like that. So like it's always been part of I just love music period, like regardless of genre for the most part, and not in the way that you get into a car and someone says, hey, what do you want to listen to, and then someone else says, oh, I love all kinds of music, and that always means top 40. Like it's never anything other than top 40. Like I legitimately do enjoy a wide variety, and bluegrass is like I read Ricky Skaggs' biography last year, autobiography, and I had no idea that he was like a teenage phenomenon, and he'd been playing with all of these like bluegrass pioneers when he was 13, 14 years old. Because when I was listening to him, I was a kid, and I didn't have any concept for how the music industry worked at all. Just nuts how some people's lives like eventually pan out.
so when you're writing, Dead Air, do you kind of put on the whatever '90s music you're kind of for the character you're writing or to kind of get into character or
I
is
wish I
that
could. I wish I could do that. I stopped being able to listen to music with lyrics while writing some time ago. It just interferes with my thought process. There was a time when I could do that for a very long time. It didn't have any impact. And I don't know if I just had too many concussions in the interim and like that part of my brain is scrambled now. But when I write mostly I listen to techno or trance. I find it helps like focus what I'm doing and I can get really because I was a rave promoter for a long time. And so I've always loved electronic music. So in a way, I'm listening to music of one of the characters in the book, but I'm not able to broad spectrum it. But I can tell you that I have recently over the last couple of years since I started Dead Air really been getting back more into CDs. And as a result of that, I have a car that only has a CD player, and I'm listening to a lot of '90s music in that car because of that. I actually found a guy who had a storage locker filled with CDs that he was selling 1,000 CDs for $50, and you couldn't. Yeah, he would just. It was in these. They're like fruit, not baskets, but like fruit. I would guess you would call them boxes. Like you would ship bananas in, and it would just they're just filled with CDs, and you couldn't pick. You would just show up and he would shovel like 8 or 9 of these into your car. Yeah, and he would tell you there's no metal and there's no punk because I guess he was supplying thrift stores in the area, and I guess those CDs always get picked out and sold on eBay or something. So I would take them home and put them in my garage and then spend like 2 weeks going through everything to try and pull out stuff I wanted. And what I discovered was there was a decent amount of '90s in there because that was like the heyday of the CD where everything was
yeah
being produced, right? So there's like dozens. I was getting like lots of Celine Dion because I live in Quebec, but I was also finding a lot of really cool classical music, which is great. Someone dumped like a full series of like 100, history of classical. So I was pulling stuff out like that. Some decent jazz. And then a lot of it's pop, like 90s pop, TLC, Britney Spears, that kind of stuff. So I pulled out as much as I could. And then whatever was left over, I actually gave to a friend of mine who was having a yard sale. And he managed to move a ton of it. Like, there are people who will buy things you thought no one listened to. Like, it's incredible.
Well, the '90s and late '80s, early '90s were the BMG Columbia House years. So
Very true. Very true. Everyone's got like Phil Collins, No Jacket Required, and all that stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, my first CD was when I went off the radio. It was the Robin Hood Men and Thieves soundtrack.
Nice, nice. Okay, I have a funny story to tell you about that. I had never seen that movie until 2 months ago. I've been getting into other forms of dead media. I don't know why, but I've started collecting laser discs. Yeah, which are weird. I borrowed a player. I was doing it just for fun at first because I like the big album art. Like it's 12-inch
Hmm.
version of and it's cool. And I could find them for like $2 or $3 at yard sales. But then I started buying more than a few, and I didn't even have a player, and I felt stupid. And I asked a buddy, I'm like, hey, he works at an AV shop, and I'm like, do you know where I could get a Laserdisc player? And he's like, well, you can have my backup player, which he just had in a storage locker. Yeah. So I have this like Pioneer from the 80s. I want to say it's from 81, and it weighs 45 pounds. And it works. I've been using that. And all this is building up to the fact that I watched that Robin Hood movie for the first time on Laserdisc a couple months ago. And when you put it in, it has the song Everything I Do It For
Oh,
You. The music video is the first thing that comes up. It's not skippable. Like you have to watch the whole music video and then
the
watch
extended version.
the extended version. The one that again brings me back to school sock hops when I was in high school. That song was inescapable.
It was Brian Adams going. You know what? I write really good rock songs, but I want to get laid.
Yeah, and I want to make $1 million while I'm doing it, right? The
Right.
video is hilarious. It's like mostly him walking across windswept cliffs, like
Yeah.
interspersed with shots from the movie.
Yeah. It's a definitely was a album.
It was an album and a surprise when I was watching the film. I had no idea that's what was going to happen from right off the bat.
So, is Dead Air on Kickstarter currently?
It is. We just finished our first week. We're recording this about 8 days into the campaign, and we're at 60% funded, which is great. I'm hoping that we had a really great support for both books, the first one and issues 1 and 2, and I'm really hopeful that most of those people come back and grab number 3. But I also realize it's been a couple years, and that can sometimes hurt momentum. It can sometimes make people forget that this comic book series is out there. But balancing that out, we also had a number of people reach out over the past year to be like, "Hey, Model UN was great, but I would love to, read another Dead Air comic. Is there something like that coming?" So it's nice to be able to have people who want to read what you're writing. It's at deadaircomic.com. It's running. That will take you right to the Kickstarter, and it's running, I believe, until the 27th of May is the last day. But we'll have extended pledges for the book itself. You can pick up issue 3 if you want. You can pick up all 3 if you want to do that too. Digital, print, it's all available. The books themselves are shipping pretty much worldwide. There are some tiers that I haven't been able to ship to Europe because they've changed a lot of the rules about what can go through the border right now, and we're
Yeah.
trying to figure that out on our side. But for the most part, if you want it, you can get it.
I was going to ask you because I know when you were doing Model UN, you were only doing digital. Am I correct?
Yeah. This time around for Dead Air, we're able to ship to the United States physical rewards, but that required a lot of planning on our part. And I had to become some type of expert on the COSMA customs tariff agreement. I'm working with a shipper called Chit Chats, and they've been really great at figuring out what codes are tariff free and which ones aren't. And we're lucky that, for the most part, books and comic books, there's no tariffs on them. Original art that's hand drawn, there's no tariffs. And if we 3D print something ourselves, no tariffs on that too.
Oh,
But we had to be careful about some other rewards that we wanted to do, ended up not being feasible. We're not doing things like pins or buttons this time because a lot of the time that comes from outside the country and it's harder to prove that it was made in Canada.
Mm.
One of the more interesting slash challenging rewards tiers we have is you can pick up issue 3 and also get a random 90s CD to come with it. We're taking it out of the CJNK record library. It's you're really rolling the dice here. Like it could be Ricky Martin, it could be Stone Temple Pilots. You know, you don't. It could be Kenny G's Christmas album. The only guarantee is that it was from the 90s, and that's a bit of challenge to ship over because I have to include where it was manufactured, right? And that includes the address of the record label. But all those records, it's on the CDs, but the CDs from like 1992, I have no idea if they're still based in that particular office, right? So I talked to the customs broker and I'm like, what do we do about that? And they're like, just put the original address. Don't try to find out where they are now. Don't worry about it. We'll handle it. So that ended up being how we dealt with it.
And how did Model UN? How did that campaign, go
It went
for
it
you?
went well. It was compared to every other campaign I had done, it is by far a much smaller effort in terms of obviously it being digital only and the number of backers and whatnot. Like we are right now 1 week into Dead Air, well past the number of backers that we had for Model UN in its entirety, and like many multiples of the funding raised. But a big function of that is how different Model UN was from the books I'd done in the past. I mean, it's black and white, it's digital only, and there was really a limited amount of rewards that we could offer in that format. So I learned a lot about how crowdfunding works for digital stuff. And
Mhm.
maybe Kickstarter isn't the best place for digital only products and releases. I'm hopeful that for the second half of Model UN, I will be offering it digitally, but I'm also going to do a compiled version, a trade version, I guess you could call it, in print form. And I have a lot of fun ideas about how to do that. And now that we've got things more or less figured out at the border, it'll be easier for me to do that and not worry too much.
For now, until
For
things,
now, yeah, that's always like the unspoken thing, like right at the end of any kind of future plans involving the border. But yeah, I've been looking into it, and so the CUSMA agreement, it's up for renewal, or basically in July, Canada, Mexico, and the US have to say whether they're going to renew or not, or whether they're going to review it. But to pull out, it takes like 10 years. So there's a long runway of comics that can come out in that period.
well, it'll be a lot easier when you're the 51st state.
That's what they tell me. That's what they tell me.
Then there'll be less.
The comic book industry is just waiting for that moment.
So, um, getting back to the comic book, how do you feel you've grown as a writer since the first two issues of Dead Air?
Uh, I'm more confident, I think, about structuring the story. Um, One of the interesting side effects of waiting so long, I think, before this book came out, is that the fourth issue is flowing really fast, and I think it's because it's been percolating in my head.
Hmm.
I mean, we both know that most writing doesn't take place when you're sitting in front of a keyboard or holding a pen. It's the kind of thing that happens in the moments where you're staring off into a window, or for me personally, when I'm in the shower, I come up with stuff that is problematic because I can't just go write it down. Like I'm soaking wet and I have to like keep repeating it in my mind, being like, I have a plot revelation. I need to remember this. And I think it's because showers are one of those moments where I'm not doing anything with my brain. I'm just staring at the wall and it's warm, it's comfortable, and everything just relaxes. And then my brain's like, hey, I just solved this problem at an inconvenient time for you. And then I have to like rush through it and get it done. But the story's really coming out. It's really flowing. I understand all the scenes that I want to have in the story. I understand how I want to wrap it up, and I understand what I want for the characters. I understand what the characters want for themselves and whether they're going to be able to get that. And normally, when I write a story, I always know how it opens and I always know what the last page looks like. I don't know why, but that's always been in my mind for every story I've started. And for Dead Air, this gap in between issues 2 and 3 time-wise, it's changed the final page just a little bit in a way that I think is much more personal and poignant for the characters involved, and I don't think that would have happened if I had been pushing it through along the earlier timeline.
And how has your experiences of writing other articles and stuff like that, has that helped your comic book writing? Have you brought anything over from those into your vice versa?
I think that the single most important influence from being from writing for a living, paying the mortgage with it, is that I don't view writing as something that requires divine inspiration. I view writing as a muscle that gets stronger the more you do it, and the more time that you put into it, the better the results you're going to get. I really think that anyone, I mean, not exactly what you asked me, but I really think that anyone who wants to write should. I don't think they should worry about their talent or their skill or their ideas, because this is one of the things, and this is true of many creative pursuits, I think. You improve as you do it, and it's the only way to improve. So as someone who I have to wake up in the morning every single day, look at a blank page, put something on it, and then send it to an editor in order to eat food that night, um, it is completely de-romanticized the idea of writing, and that applied to a comic book is extremely helpful for a couple of reasons. Primarily because I have to get the work done. I when I'm pushing through a story for the first time, I set aside probably an hour a day to work on the story, and regardless of what comes out of me, it could be garbage. I'm still doing it, and then after 2 weeks of that, you have 10 hours of story writing that you've done, and you can start to figure out where you're at. The other flip side of that is I'm not really that attached to what I write. So when I'm grateful for the editors that I work with on comic books. On Dead Air, it's been someone named Kevin Birchner who's been really helpful. I can send him a script, and he can write back and say, this, like, it happened in Model UN. I think we were talking about it, but sometimes you get a script back from an editor, and there's a part that you love so much, and they're like, this has to go, this doesn't fit the story, this drags things down, this character moment doesn't work. And you have to objectively look at it the same way they did and be like, hey, you're right, this has to go, I love it, but it doesn't work for the story, and you pitch it. And I think that because my entire livelihood is based on people tearing down my stories if they don't work, I don't take it personally. And I'm able to like have that 30,000 foot view of the story. So that's a blessing for me when I'm approaching something that's a little more creative and on the fiction side.
And are you currently reading any comic books or anything like that that are that you're really enjoying, or any writers that you're following?
I've been on a kick of like some really not so great comic books, and I'm not going to name them because every comic book that exists is a minor miracle. It's very difficult to make comics, and I'm glad that people make comics, even if I might not happen to jive with those comics.
Hmm.
But I will say that I've been reading a lot of Linda Berry lately, and her work has been completely unexpected. I've been reading a lot of her work where she's writing about characters that are living in a small town in the southern US in the 80s. It's a woman, well, a teenager and her younger sister, and what their lives are like. And I'm shocked by how much I can relate to these characters that live an experience that is so different from mine, yet so many of the emotions involved. Like I feel like I can connect with them, and it's been incredible. I totally recommend anything she's ever done. Right now, I'm reading a scrapbook that she put together of early work when she was very, very young, kind of leading up to her professional stuff. She started getting published in the 70s and then through the 80s and 90s. And it's just really cool stuff that I've really been enjoying. I will, however, talk some crap about Steven Tyler's autobiography, which I just finished this week. Oh my goodness. It's like towards the end, I was just scanning through it, trying to find anything that was about music because half of the book was like weird woo woo spiritual, where does music come from stuff. Half of the book is hardcore drug use, and then like 10% of the book is like, here's a cool story about when we were recording this album. And like that's what I was looking for. Like I wanted to hear more about Aerosmith, but that
Yeah.
was really hard to get to. So it was just a super strange book. I will say though, excellent design. Like the covers were really nice, the art direction was perfect. I just wish, and it's odd because he had a ghostwriter working with him that he acknowledges. And I can't imagine what that experience was like for that person. Like if this is what filtered through, then wow. Like what are the notes like, you know?
Yeah. Well, is there anything about Dead Air that we maybe didn't cover that you wanted to make sure people, knew about?
Uh I think that sometimes people look at a book that's set in the 90s and they're like, "Oh, it's just like a nostalgia play." Um Personally for me, I don't have nostalgia for my past. I feel like nostalgia is a word that describes longing for a period of time that didn't actually exist. Like it's something we create in our minds a lot of the time. And I grew up, I mean, we both grew up with a ton of boomer nostalgia for the 60s. And having to go through that and having that force fed to us in so many different ways culturally really left a distaste in my mouth for the concept of doing that to someone else about my own youth. So when I have this book set in the 90s, it's because for me story wise, that's what makes the most sense for these characters. It's a period that I know well, and I also get to avoid stuff like cell phones and constant internet access. Like it's just a different way of telling stories that I personally enjoy more. So have an open mind. If you're into the 90s, there's lots of stuff you're gonna like in here. But if you're like, oh, 90s, that's just a gimmick for the story, no, like go into it with an open mind, and you might learn some stuff about university radio, might learn some stuff about the music scene back then, and you might learn some stuff about what it's like to lose someone you care about, and then have the hope dangled in front of you that maybe you didn't. And that's kind of where I'm going with Dead Air. I think it's ultimately a story about friendship.
Do you want to give no, that was a pretty good pitch. But do you want to give give a one last pitch for the book and where people can find more from you?
Sure. Last pitch for the book. What if one day you could talk to the dead? And what if, when you did talk to the dead, you found out that a big part of your past didn't actually happen the way you thought it did, and you finally have a chance to set some things right? That's essentially what Dead Air is about, and it's about a group of friends across time who are trying to do that. You can find it at deadaircomic.com. If you want to find out more stuff about me, benjaminhunting.com actually has a ton of stuff about Dead Air there too. I do a lot of blog posts talking about my inspiration behind the book, the music of that period, weird stuff like Canadian content regulations for radio. There's stuff about Code 45, my previous comic books, Model UN is also there, and all my car writing is there too, and just random ramblings. Because I'm trying to put less stuff on social media, more stuff on my blog, and I've been more disciplined over the last year, posting there 3 times a week, getting that stuff out there, just because I want to have a place that where I can express myself that isn't owned by a giant media corporation. So yeah, benjaminhunting.com is the easiest way to find out all about me.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time this evening to chat, and we'll be sure
Of
to
course.
follow the campaign over on Comic Watch and our weekly roundup, which we post every Saturday at noon, 12 Eastern. And yeah, this interview will be there along with some other campaigns that you should definitely check out if you and support if you are able to.
Thanks again, Chad. Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, we'll have to talk again soon, and have a great evening.
You too. Good night.